And the last characteristic of the tongue that James gives us is the tongue can be unreliable. In verse 9 he says, "Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God." In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, we learn that God made man in His own image. In the image of God made He him, male and female, created He them. Every individual in this room is created in the spiritual image of God. That means you. That means me. That means your friends, your family, your co-workers, the guy that cuts you off in traffic. It's made in the image of God. And so we come into these walls and we worship God. We lift up our voices to Him in songs of praise. We lift up our voices to Him in prayer. And we claim to be His servants. John chapter 3 and verse 16, we learn that God so loved the world, that means every individual in it, that He gave His only begotten Son. God has that great love for every individual. And yet we who claim to be His servants, when somebody cuts you off in traffic, did you think, now there's a person who's made in the image of God? Is that what you say to yourself? Oftentimes not. Perhaps it should be. The tongue can be unreliable, can't it? Verse 10, "Out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursings, my brethren. These things ought not so to be. Does the fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries? Either a vine figs, so can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh." The reliability of the tongue. We can think, well, as we profess to be Christians, we should live the Christian life. And we can restrain our tongue, and automatically we can rule out, well, I know I shouldn't say any curse words. I know I shouldn't tell any dirty jokes or anything that's mean or degrading to people. I know I shouldn't say that. But is that all that's required of us? In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, the Apostle Paul gives us some instructions concerning the tongue. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, he says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth." Okay, I've got that, Paul. Nothing bad. No problems. But notice what comes after the but. He says, "But this is what should proceed out of your mouth, that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers." And so when you begin to speak, before you start, do you stop and think, what is it that I'm about to say? Is this edifying? Is it going to build up the person that I'm talking to? Is it going to build up the person that I'm talking about? Or is it going to tear down? Is this ministering grace? Or is it corrupt? The tongue can often be unreliable. And so when we speak, when we prepare to speak, perhaps if we would stop and think about what it is that we're saying and give it that qualifier, to make sure that it is edifying and not tearing down, perhaps we wouldn't be speaking so much. Again in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, the Apostle Paul tells us to walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Because as Christians and servants of God, our mission is to bring lost souls to Christ. And we don't have much time. We don't know even how much time we have. We know that we are all going to die unless Christ comes back before we die. And we don't know when either of those events are going to happen. So we need to redeem the time. We need to walk, that is, live in a wise manner before those that are outside of the Lord's body and show them what a Christian is so that we can draw them to Christ. And so in verse 6, he says, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man." If our tongues are unreliable, we're not going to be very effective ministers of the gospel, are we? We need to be careful what it is that we say to those living about us in the world, and also what we say about those living about us in the world. Because they know what we say. They hear it. And if I was to stand before you in the pulpit and utter a string of curse words, would you listen to anything else that I said after that? Probably not. And yet so many times we get out into the world, we get outside of these four walls and resume our normal lives, if you will. And our tongues are unrestrained just a little bit. We just loosen the leash a tad. And the people in the world see that. And they also see through it. And again, Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. Here the Lord tells us, "Again you have heard that it has been said of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths." That is, they said, don't swear falsely. Don't tell a lie. Say you're going to do something, under oath, go ahead and do it. Don't swear falsely. "But I say unto you," verse 34, "swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, neither by earth, for it is His footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, and nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil." And we all know that guy, the one who cries wolf too many times. And when he begins to speak, he says, really, really, it's the truth this time. He tells too many tall tales, too many fishing stories. He exaggerates whatever he says. He has lots of fantastic tales to tell. And when he speaks, everybody takes it with a bucket of salt because the grain just doesn't quite cut it. The Lord says that the Christian should not be that guy. But rather, the Christian should be the guy that when he speaks and says, I'm going to do something, everybody that hears that knows, well, that's done. Because he said so. He said he would do it, so I know it's going to get done. When a Christian says, this is the case, then the people that hear it can say, well, I know that's fact because he said so. The Christian should not be the guy that has to say, I know normally I don't tell the complete truth. I exaggerate it a little bit or tweak it, stretch it. But right now I'm laying it on the line. No, the Christian should be a guy that's known as a man or a woman of his or her word. Having a reliable tongue. Again, 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12. 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12, the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in manner of life, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. And here he's speaking to the young preacher Timothy, but these words here are applicable to every one of us here in this room. We need to be an example to the believers, an example of what a Christian really should be. We should strive to be somebody that is looked upon. That person right there is a man or a woman of God. If you want to see what a Christian is, look at them. Imitate me as I imitate Christ, Paul said. That should be what each and every one of us in this room can say. And we are to be an example so that we can uplift not only those out in the world, but also those around us, our Christian brethren, and help them as they strive to get to heaven. And notice the very first quality that he gives us is in word. Because if they can hear you from 100 yards away that your speech doesn't match what's in this book, they're not going to investigate any further. And then he says in manner of life, because if they see your lifestyle, they know where you go on Friday night. They know what you do when you leave church. They're not going to investigate any further if it doesn't match what's in this book. And they're never going to bother to see if you have love or faith or purity. Because it's not going to be there, not really. Because it's not there in word, it's not there in your manner of living.